Hello students, today we are going to do the first chapter of class 12 Vistas, the third level by Jack Finney. The third level by Jack Finney is about the harsh realities of war. War has irreversible consequences, thus leaving people in a state of insecurity. It is also about modern day problems and how common man tends to escape reality by various means. In this story, a man named Charlie hallucinates and reaches the third level of the Grand Central Station, which only has two levels. So, as I said, that this chapter it deals with the commuter, that is our Charlie, who imagines himself to be at the third level of the Grand Central Railway Station. In reality, there are only two levels of this station in New York. The third level of the station is the creation of the Charlie's imagination. The story is full of fantasy. The narrator makes the third level and the journey back in time a medium of escape. The story is left open ended as the author makes the narrator's psychiatrist friend, who diagnosed that it was a waking dream wish fulfillment, also travel back in time. So, before you read, have you ever had any curious experience which others find hard to believe? If yes, do share it with me. Now, let us begin with the reading of the chapter. The president of the New York Central and the New York, New Haven and Hartford railroads will swear on a stack of timetables that there are only two. But I say there are three, because I have been on the third level of the Grand Central Station. Yes, I have taken the obvious step. I talked to a psychiatrist friend of mine. Among others, I told him about the third level at Grand Central Station, and he said it was a waking dream wish fulfillment. He said I was unhappy. That made my wife kind of mad, but he explained that he meant the modern world is full of insecurity, fear, war, worry, and all the rest of it, and that I just want to escape. Well, who doesn't? Everybody I know wants to escape, but they don't wander down into any third level at Grand Central Station. So here the story it begins with the mention of a third level at the Grand Central Station, which only has two levels in real. The narrator himself is aware that even the presidents of New York Central and New York, New Haven, and Hartford railroads would express great confidence in the existence of only two levels, but he himself has been to the third level. Considering the entire scenario, Charlie, the narrator, had a word with his psychiatrist friend. He explained that Charlie was experiencing a waking dream wish fulfillment, or in other words, hallucination. According to the psychiatrist, Charlie was unhappy, the fact her wife did not like. Upon explaining further, it became clear that it is the burden of all the modern problems that is pushing him to experience the apparent perception of something not present. He tends to escape the reality. Charlie agreed with what his psychiatrist friend had to say, but he stood still, but he still found it a bit odd to have been to the third level of the Grand Central Station. So, that is why, as the explanation given by the psychiatrist, that since the world is full of fear, insecurity, war, and worry, and everybody wants to escape from all these problems, so they find a mean to escape, and he found it in the form of a third level. But that is the reason, he said, and my friends all agreed. Everything points to it, they claimed. My stamp collecting, for example, that's a temporary refuge from reality. Well, maybe, but my grandfather didn't need any refuge from reality. Things were pretty nice and peaceful in his days. All from all I hear, and he started my collection. It is a nice collection too. Blocks of four of practically every US issue, first day covers, and so on. President Roosevelt collected stamps too, you know. So here, life in the times of Charlie's grandfather was tension free, and why it is said, because when Charlie begins to believe in the possibility that he has been experiencing all this to escape the harsh realities of the modern world, his friends agreed to it as well. Even his stamp collecting is a sort of refuge he resorts to in order to feel protected. On the other hand, he starts thinking otherwise when he says that his grandfather started his stamp collection, but in those days they had not seen the consequences of war, and there was peace, harmony, and security. His grandfather must have not been insecure, so he didn't need to pursue philately as a temporary refuge from reality. He took up this hobby to make his leisure hours more productive and a fulfilling experience. The collection, moreover, was amazing, with blocks of four of practically every US issue. Even President Roosevelt collected stamps. Anyway, here's what happened at Grand Central. One night last summer, I worked late at the office. I was in a hurry to get uptown to my apartment, so I decided to take the subway from Grand Central because it's faster than the bus. So here he starts explaining what exactly happened and begins with how he chose to take the subway to his apartment instead of the usual bus after a late night shift, and he did this in order to save time. So he worked late at the office and was fatigued and bored and wished to return to his wife and to the comfort of his home as fast as possible. And he thought that the bus would take longer to cover the distance, so he decided to take subway. Now I don't know why this should have happened to me. I'm just an ordinary guy named Charlie, 31 years old. So here we come to know the name of a narrator, and he is just an ordinary guy of 31, and I was wearing a tan gabardine suit and a straw hat with a fancy band. So he tells us how he dressed himself. I passed a dozen men who looked just like me, and I wasn't trying to escape from anything. I just wanted to get home to Lusa, my wife. So he says that it was so ordinary that he could see other similar men at the station. He explains how he was in his normal state of mind, not wanting to escape from anywhere. All he wanted was to be with his wife Lusa at that hour. He still doesn't understand why this happened with him. What happened with him? He found the third level at the Grand Central Railway Station, which in reality only had two levels. I turned into Grand Central from Vanderbilt Avenue and went down the steps to the first level, where you take trains like the 20th century. Then I walked down another flight, means series of steps, to the second level where the suburban trains, the city trains, leave from. Ducked into means uh, lower the body or head or body quickly. So he dug into an arched, curved doorway heading for the subway and got lost. That's easy to do. I have been in and out of the Grand Central hundreds of times, but I am always bumping, means running, into new doorways and stairs and corridors. Once I got into a tunnel about a mile long and came out in the lobby of Roosevelt Hotel. Another time I came up in an office building on 46th Street, 3 blocks away. So Charlie, he comes to the part of the incident where he entered the Grand Central from Vanderbilt Avenue and took the stairs to the first level where one boarded trains like the 20th century. Then he went down another floor to reach the second level from where the suburban trains leave. From there, he entered an arched doorway and got lost. It was nothing unusual for him because even if he had come to that station 1,000 times, means he had been to that station hundreds of times, there were occasions he bumped into new corridors and doorways, means he found new ways, new passages, and once he entered the wrong lobby and reached Roosevelt Hotel, and another time in an office building which was 3 blocks away. Sometimes I think Central is growing like a tree, pushing out. Grand Central, I know you remember that this is a station, and he's talking about the railway station, and he says that it is growing like a tree, pushing out new corridors and staircases like roots. There's probably a long tunnel that nobody knows about, feeling its way under the right city right now, on its way to Times Square and maybe another to Central Park. And maybe because for so many people through the years, Grand Central has been an exit, a way of escape. Maybe that's how the tunnel I got into, but I never told my psychiatrist friend about that idea. So Charlie, he wondered that Grand Central was expanding at a very fast rate, just like a tree and with its roots. It is no big deal that they even have a secret tunnel under the city to the Times Square or maybe the Central Park. He feels it might be because Grand Central is a place of exit for innumerable people. He also managed to escape reality because of the same reason, although he never shared it with his psychiatrist friend. The corridor I was in began angling, means turning at an angle. Began angling left and slanting, sloping downward, and I thought that was wrong, but I kept on walking. All I could hear was the empty sound of my own footsteps, and I didn't pass a soul, means not even a single person he found on his way. Then I heard that sort of hollow roar ahead that means open space and people talking. The tunnel turned sharp left. I went down a short flight of stairs and came out on the third level at Grand Central Station. For just a moment, I thought I was back on the second level, but I saw the room was smaller. There were fewer ticket windows and train gates, and the information booth in the center was wood and old looking, and the man in the booth wore a green eye shade and long black sleeve protectors. The lights were dim and sort of flickering. Then I saw why they were open flame gas lights. So here the unusual corridor which Charlie had entered into, it began angling left and slanting downward, which he felt odd about what, but nevertheless he kept on walking. There was no one except him, and the voice of his feet echoed. He finally heard the sound of people talking from a distance. Then he took a left and walked down the stairs again, only to reach the third level of the Grand Central. He thought he had somehow made his way to the second level, but as he noticed, The room was smaller, there were fewer ticket windows and train gates, and the information booth in the center was wood and old looking. The man in the booth was also different, and the station was dim, means it was lit for there were open flame gas lights. So light was dim because of the gas lights. I mean, no bulbs or tubes were there like we have nowadays. So that is why the light was not proper. What else he found over there? There were brass spittoons. Spittoons, they are the pot uh, having a funnel shaped top which is used for spitting. So there were brass spittoons on the floor, and across the station, a glint of light caught my eye. Glint means sudden flash of light. A man was pulling a gold watch from his vest pocket. He snapped open the cover, glanced at his watch, and frowned. He wore a derby hat, a black four-button suit with tiny lapels, and he had a big black handlebar mustache. Then I looked around and saw that everyone in the station was dressed like 1890 something. I never saw so many beards, sideburns, and fancy mustaches in my life. A woman walked in through the train gate. She wore a dress with leg of mutton sleeves and skirts to the top of her high buttoned shoes. Back of her, out on the tracks, I caught a glimpse of a locomotive, a very small Courier and Ives locomotive with a funnel shaped stack, and then I knew. So when he reached the third level, what he saw, he could see brass spittoons everywhere. When suddenly a glimpse of light caught his eye, and he saw a man pulling his gold watch from the vest. He was dressed in an old fashioned style. Suddenly he noticed that everyone was dressed like the 19th century. It was basically the time before deadly wars. So many beards and fancy mustaches all around, something that Charlie had never seen before. He even saw a very small Courier and Ives locomotive, which made him sure about which time he is in. To make sure, I walked over to a newsboy and glanced at the stack of papers at his feet. It was the World, and the World hasn't been published for years. The lead means main story, said something about President Cleveland. He was the 22nd president of America. I have found that front page since in the public library files, and it was printed June 11, 1894. So, to validate his suspicion, to make sure his doubt, he went over to the newspaper boy who was selling The World, a newspaper which was discontinued years ago. There were some headlines about the then President Cleveland. The date on the front page was also June 11, 1894. He was now sure. What he was sure about? He was sure about that he has reached the third level. The third level exists, though people knew only about two levels, but he, according to him, there is a third level at Grand Central. Now next, he turned towards the ticket windows, knowing that here on the third level at Grand Central, I could buy tickets that would take Lusa and me anywhere in the United States we wanted to go. In the year 1894, and I wanted two tickets to Galesburg, Illinois. Have you ever been there? It's a wonderful town. Still, with the big old frame houses. So in this para, the description of Galesburg, Illinois is given. Please read it carefully. So how were the houses? Big old frame houses, huge lawns, and tremendous trees whose branches meet overhead and roof the streets. And in 1894, summer evenings were twice as long, and people sat out on their lawns, the men smoking cigars and talking quietly, the women waving palm leaf fans, with the fireflies all around in a peaceful with the fireflies all around in a peaceful world. To be back there with the First World War still 20 years off and the World War II over 40 years in the future, I wanted 2 tickets for that. So here immediately Charlie went to the ticket window to get the tickets for Galesburg, Illinois for him and his wife. Why? It was a wonderful town with a lot of greenery. He was well aware that from here one could buy tickets that would take them anywhere in the United States. He describes how things were in 1894 before the two world wars took place. Evenings were twice as long as they are now, and men and women living in peace and serenity. The clerk figured the fare. He glanced at my fancy hat band, but he figured the fare. Figured means calculated. And I had enough for 2 coach tickets one way. But when I counted out the money and looked up, the clerk was staring at me. He nodded at the bills. That aren't money, mister, he said. And if you're trying to skin me, means if you're trying to cheat me, you won't get any very far. And he glanced at the cash drawer beside me. Of course, the money was old style bills, half again as big as the money we use nowadays and different looking. I turned away and got out fast. There's nothing nice about jail even in 1894. So, as the clerk, he calculated the fare. He looked at Charlie's fancy hat band. Charlie had enough for one-sided journey. Just as he took out money, the clerk informed that this is not the acceptable legal tender. Legal tender here is word used for the money. And by any chance, if he tried to be smart, he won't be able to get away with it. He glanced at his cash drawer and realized that the currency used back then was different and almost double the size. He ran out because he didn't want to go to jail. And that was that. I left the same way I came, I suppose. So he is saying that that day it ended and he came out of the station, and he says that I left the station in the same way as I entered it, and he is thinking it, imagining it. Next day during lunch hour, I drew $300 out of the bank, nearly all we had, and bought old style currency. That really worried my psychiatrist friend. You can buy old money at almost any coin dealers, but you have to pay a premium. Premium means extra money over original price. My $300 bought less than 200 in old style bills. Means he paid $300, but he received even less than $200 when he bought old style money. But I didn't care. Eggs were 13 cents a dozen in 1894. So next day when he went to withdraw his entire savings and got them converted into old money by paying some amount of premium, and it cost him much. Means because he paid $300 and got less than $200, but that thing did not worried him. It instead worried his psychiatrist friend, but he still went on with it But then he says eggs cost 13 cents a dozen in 1894. Means he's telling us that how cheap the eggs were in that time, during that time. But I have never again found the corridor that leads to the third level at Grand Central Station. Although I have tried often enough, Luisa was pretty worried when I told her all this and didn't want me to look for the third level anymore, and after a while I stopped. I went back to my stamps, but now we are both looking every weekend because now we have proof that the third level is still there. My friend Sam Winner disappeared. Nobody knew where, but I sort of suspected because Sam, a city boy, and I used to tell him about Galesburg. I went to school there, and he always said he liked the sound of the place, and that's where he is all right in 1894. So here he, as we read in the last para, that he changed his currency into old money, but unfortunately he could never find the way to the third level corridor again despite hard efforts. His wife Luisa was pretty worried when she got to know about it all. After a while, Charlie went back to finding distractions with the help of stamps. Means he tried to divert his mind. Somehow Sam, the psychiatrist, remember his friend psychiatrist? Sam, he disappeared out of the blue means out of the scene. Charlie suspected that he had gone to Galesburg. He finds himself in the time space of 1894. Because one night fussing with my stamp collection. So why he is telling us that his friend has gone into that era in 1894, he says that one night when he was fussing means he was showing his excessive concern about his stamp collection. He found, he says, I found, kya, what? Well, do you know what a first day cover is? When a news, he is explaining to us that what is a first day cover. He says when a new stamp is issued, stamp collectors buy some and use them to mail envelopes to themselves on the very first day of sale, and the postmark proves the date. The envelope is called a first day cover. They are never opened, you just put blank paper in the envelope. So one night when Charlie was fussing with his stamp collection, he came across a first day cover, and he tells us what is this. It is an envelope with a stamp on it that stamp collectors mail to themselves on the first day of its sale to mark the date. They are just blank inside and are not meant to be opened. That night, among my oldest first day covers, I found one that shouldn't have been there. But there it was. It was there because someone had mailed it to my grandfather at his home in Galesburg. That's what the address on the envelope said, and it had been there since July 18, 1894. The postmark showed that, yet I didn't remember it at all. The stamp was a 6-cent dull brown with a picture of President Garfield. He was the 20th president of America. Naturally, when the envelope came to Granddad in the mail, it went right into his collection and stayed there till I took it out and opened it. The paper inside wasn't blank, it read. So, the night when he was uh, fussing through his stamp collection, he found by surprise one of his grandfather's old first day covers. Someone had mailed it to his grandfather at his home at Galesburg, and he saw from the address on the envelope. The postmark showed that it had been there since July 1894. The stamp had a picture of President Garfield on it. It was a 6-cent dull brown color stamp. His grandfather had put it in his stamp collection, and the Charlie now discovered it. The paper inside and discovered it. There was a paper inside it which was not blank. It read 941 Willard Street, Galesburg, Illinois, July 18, 1894. Charlie, I got to wishing that you were right. Then I got to believing that you were right. And Charlie, it's true. I found the third level. I have been here 2 weeks, and right now, down the street at Dallas, someone is playing a piano, and there are all out on the front porch singing Seeing Nellie Home, and I am invited over for lemonade. Come on back, Charlie and Lusa. Keep looking till you find the third level. It's worth it, believe me. And the note is signed by Sam. So the letter, it talked about how the writer wished his third level story was true until he actually started believing it to be true. He had found the third level and had been there for 2 weeks. He describes the place he was at that time. He asked Charlie and Lusa to never stop searching for the third level and come back. And this letter had been signed off as Sam. Means this letter, he found this letter written by his psychiatrist friend Sam. As the stamp and coin store I go to, I found out that Sam bought $800 worth of old style currency that ought to set up in a new little hay, feed and grain business. He always said that's what he really wished he could do, and he certainly can't go back to his old business. Not in Galesburg, Illinois in 1894, his old business. Why? Sam was my psychiatrist. So as I said that the letter, it had been signed off as Sam. Charlie found out from the coin store that Charlie used to visit, that Sam had bought old currency worth $800, which was to be utilized in a hay, feed and grain business, which Sam always wished to do, but and he could not go back to his old business, certainly not in Galesburg, Illinois. Why he couldn't back to his old business? And his old business was that he was a psychiatrist. He couldn't practice his this profession of being a psychiatrist. Why? Because his profession did not exist during that time. In 1894, psychiatrists were not there. And why psychiatrists couldn't be there? Because that was a peaceful time. People were living a peaceful life, and that was the time before the two world wars happened. So the story, it ends at a mysterious note where Charlie is wondering that Sam is psychiatrist and he has also found the third level, and he is saying, he's asking Charlie and his wife to keep searching for this third level, and it is worth living there. So this was the chapter, and you must be thinking whether this chapter, whether there was a third level and is it true or not. Let me tell you that the third level of Grand Central Station was just a medium of escape for Charlie. Since modern world offered a lot of challenges, and in order to take refuge from reality, to escape from reality, we might resort to daydreaming or hallucination. We all understand the miseries of the modern world, which is full of worry and pressure. Thus, in order to take the burden away from his shoulder and heap a sigh of relief, Charlie resorted to escaping reality, although unintentionally. He found this level in his imagination and without any intention. That is all for this chapter. If you have any query, ask me in the group. Thank you.